One of the most unusual things prophets did in the Bible is highlighted in the story of Hosea. God told Hosea to marry a prostitute, which was as shocking then as it is now. This story can be found in Hosea 1 verses 1 to 2, which states, "The Lord gave this message to Hosea son of Beeri during the years when Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah were kings of Judah, and Jeroboam son of Jehoash was king of Israel. When the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him, 'Go and marry a prostitute so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution.' This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. This action was intended to symbolize Israel's unfaithfulness to God through idolatry. Hosea's time was marked by prosperity and military success, but the people's moral and spiritual state was in decline. The kingdom was split after the reigns of King David and King Solomon, with Hosea living about 650 years after the Israelites first entered the Promised Land. During the rule of King Jeroboam II, Israel was thriving in battles but strayed into dishonesty and idolatry, worshiping a false god named Baal. This turning away from God was seen as betrayal, like a spouse's infidelity. Hosea's life and marriage to Gomer, who continued her unfaithful ways even after marriage, served as a poignant illustration of Israel's spiritual adultery. This story is a reminder of God's unwavering love and mercy, even when his people are unfaithful, as Hosea's actions symbolize God's enduring commitment to Israel despite their persistent sins. This vision is about the future, describing the end times, and it will come to pass. Even if it seems slow, we must wait patiently, for it will surely happen without delay. Although God's actions may seem delayed, we need to be patient because his timing is always perfect. God is in control, and his timing is essential. We live between two significant points in time, birth and death, in the valley of time. God's plans are fully under his control, and we simply await his arrival. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry." This teaches us that although God's actions may appear slow, his timing is impeccable. Since God is in charge, we need to trust in his perfect timing. In Habakkuk 2, verses 9 to 19, we see a series of warnings and woes. Woe to him who covets evil gain for his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of disaster. You give shameful counsel to your house, cutting off many peoples, and sin against your soul. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the timbers will answer it. Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, who establishes a city by iniquity. Behold, is it not of the Lord of hosts that the peoples labor to feed the fire, and nations weary themselves in vain? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Habakkuk warns against dishonest gain, violence, and idolatry, highlighting that God will address these sins in his time. He emphasizes living by faith while waiting for God's perfect timing. Habakkuk 2 verse 4 says, "Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith." This passage encourages us to rely on faith, trusting God's timing and justice. Elijah, exhausted and overwhelmed, lay down under a broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly, an angel touched him and told him to get up and eat. When Elijah looked around, he saw a loaf of bread baked on hot coals and a pitcher of water near his head. He ate and drank, then lay down again. The angel of the Lord returned, touched him once more, and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." Elijah ate and drank again, gaining enough strength from that meal to travel for 40 days and nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. 1 Kings 19 verses 5 to 8. This passage illustrates God's mercy and provision. Elijah, worn out physically and spiritually, needed rest and nourishment. God provided him a place to rest under a broom tree and gave him miraculous food for sustenance. God's care for Elijah's physical needs underscores the importance of taking care of our bodies, reminding us that sometimes rest and replenishment are the most spiritual actions we can take. Just as Elijah received continuous care from God, we too must recognize the significance of food and rest, especially in times of depression and weakness. After eating, Elijah continued his journey to Mount Horeb, guided by God's gentle and loving care. Instead of rebuking Elijah for his fear and exhaustion, God provided him with what he needed to recover. This narrative highlights the grace and patience God extends to his servants. Elijah's story also teaches us about reliance on God. In another episode, God commanded Elijah to hide by the brook Cherith, promising that ravens would feed him there. 1 Kings 17 verses 3-6. This period of solitude was a time for Elijah to depend entirely on God's provision, receiving food from unexpected sources. The ravens, considered unclean, brought him bread and meat daily, emphasizing God's power to provide through the most unlikely means. This story reminds us to trust in God's timing and methods, even when they seem unconventional. God's provision is sufficient, teaching us to rely on Him daily. Just as Elijah trusted God for his daily sustenance, we too must trust in God's care, recognizing that He knows our needs and provides for them, often in surprising ways. God's provision often comes in unexpected ways, but it is always timely and perfectly planned. One notable example from the Bible is the use of ravens, which appear only a few times but carry significant meaning. For instance, after the Great Flood, Noah sent out a raven to look for dry land. Genesis 8 verses 6-7. Despite the catastrophic event, the raven managed to survive by scavenging off the debris floating on the water, showcasing survival and resilience. Ravens also appear in the Song of Solomon, where the beloved's hair is compared to the blackness of a raven. Song of Solomon 5 verse 11, turning their typically negative image into a symbol of beauty. However, they are portrayed more grimly in Proverbs 30 verse 17, where ravens are said to pick out the eyes of a rebellious child, indicating a dishonorable end. Isaiah 34 verse 11 uses ravens to depict the desolation of Edom, where only these scavengers inhabit the barren land. Despite their often negative image, God's care for ravens is evident in Psalm 147 verse 9, which states that He provides food for them. Jesus also uses ravens to illustrate God's provision, teaching His disciples that if God cares for the ravens, He will surely care for them as well. Luke 12 verse 24. The Bible also contains a peculiar law in Leviticus 11 verses 13-19, where ravens are declared unclean and unfit for consumption due to their scavenging nature. This law not only set dietary boundaries, but also protected the Jewish people. The story of Elijah further highlights God's perfect timing and provision. During a severe drought, God instructed Elijah to confront King Ahab, who had led Israel astray. Despite the tension and accusation, Elijah, armed with God's authority, challenged Ahab and the prophets of Baal to a showdown on Mount Carmel. 1 Kings 18 verse 19. Outnumbered but unafraid, Elijah's faith in God demonstrated that numbers didn't matter when God was on his side. This event set the stage for a dramatic demonstration of God's power, reminding us that it's not the opposition we face, but who is with us that counts. This confrontation was a pivotal moment for Israel, offering them a chance to return to God. Reflecting on this, we are prompted to consider how we respond to truth, whether we are quick to blame others like Ahab or willing to heed the call to change.
If you found this video enjoyable, please consider liking and sharing it. Additionally, subscribing to this channel will ensure that you receive more updates in the future. Thank you.